Without a doubt, Salvation Prophecy is one of the most ambitious indie games I've ever played. The sheer scope of the game keeps expanding as you play, and it takes a while to grasp just how vast the game can be. Whether it delivers on said ambition, however, is what we're here to decide. Salvation Prophecy is a science fiction game based around a galactic war between 4 factions. You pick a faction, start out as a foot soldier taking on planetary invasion missions and rise the ranks, quickly being assigned a spaceship, allowing you to explore the galaxy and take on space station assault missions and pirate bounties, eventually taking full control of your faction as their military leader. There are 4 factions in the game, each with their own planetary structures, fighters, space stations and ground units, and while the former 3 are all cosmetic, the ground units have varying stats and abilities. The factions also have very different dialogue, creating a lot of personality between them. The Free Nations are the last remains of humanity as we know it. Their infantry are the most balanced and their dialogue is very militaristic. The Salvation are mutated humans. Their infantry use psychic powers and their dialogue has a hint of fantasy with religious undertones and lots of references to the prophecy. The Drone Unity are a faction of sentient attack drones that have rebelled against their former masters and now fight for their own freedom. They have the most aggressive ground units and very robotic, cold and aggressive dialogue. The Weir are another robotic faction. They were created as thinking machines and given human DNA to think outside the confines of pure logic. This has unfortunately resulted in them going more or less insane. Their ground units use very unpredictable weaponry and their dialogue contains more than a hint of insanity. The ground combat takes the form of a third-person shooter and is activated when attacking another faction's colony, as well as on exploration missions, but we'll get to exploration later. The invasions send you and 20 other infantrymen out to destroy waves of defending infantry, as well as whatever defenses the planet has, such as turrets and air support. The chaos of having 40 infantry units blasting away at each other while also being bombed from the sky and shot at by turrets creates a very satisfying atmosphere and really does give you that epic war zone feel. The equally epic music also helps. Actually controlling your character is functional but could be better. You have the basic movement with no ability to jump or crouch, and while there is a button for fine aiming, it doesn't zoom the camera at all, only slowing down the mouse movement, which if it wasn't for the additional HUD elements that appear when you do aim, it would be pretty useless. However, you never feel like you're fighting with the controls. They do their job, and the actual battlefield chaos does a great job of overcoming any issues with the controls. Controlling your spaceship is incredibly easy with its arcade physics and near instant reactions to your input. This is not a hardcore simulation, so anyone expecting Newtonian physics will be disappointed. For everyone else, it's a very welcome control scheme that doesn't take any time to feel comfortable with and lets you focus on what's important: blowing shit up. The chaotic atmosphere is also present with 40 fighters dogfighting while station turrets add to the firefight, and in later parts of the game, even battle cruisers. The controls fare much better here than they do in the ground sections. Simply put, they just feel right. Every successful mission rewards you with cash, which you can use to buy new gear for your soldier as well as upgrades to your fighter. It adds a great sense of empowerment when buying stronger gear and fighter upgrades, and it's a very good gauge for progression. But it is slightly disappointing that there isn't much choice in the matter. There are no side grades, so to speak. By the end of the game, you're just going to have the highest level everything. A minor disappointment in the end, however, as testing out your new laser beam or rocket launcher is always exciting. You also get skill points for getting so many kills. These are used to increase your defense, attack power, and the sort of consumables you can carry. Again, it is slightly disappointing that beyond picking the order in which you get the upgrades, eventually you are just going to have them all. You start the game out as a lowly infantryman and quickly gain a fighter, after which you're allowed to fly to any space station to accept more missions or bounties. The next few ranks offer minor things I won't spoil, but don't drastically change the gameplay until the final rank where you become the commander of your faction. With a relatively large gap between get spaceship and command everything, there is a large risk of the game becoming repetitive, but it circumvents this by slowly introducing new technology just as you think you're getting comfortable with the way things are. At first, planetary battles are just you, your squad, 20 enemies and a few turrets. Eventually, air support bombers are introduced, the buildings get defenses installed, and a mech patrols the area. New aspects are also introduced to the space combat in much the same way. Actually commanding your faction is done through a very light strategy interface where you get to choose to colonize planets or build space stations in their orbit. You can pick what structures to build on the colonies and what units to defend them with. You can also build units on space stations and command them to attack. Unfortunately, you can only ever send one attack at once, which somewhat defeats the purpose of having many space stations and armies at the ready. But overall, commanding the factions that once gave you orders does feel very satisfying. Up to now, I've painted the game out to be nothing but this galactic war, and for the first half of the game it does seem to be just that. However, the prophecy plays a huge part of the game, driving the entire story. At various points you will be sent out to explore unstable wormholes, which eventually lead to alien planets. Exploring these planets on foot is pretty cool, as they do feel alien and you never know what to expect. All planets have some sort of hostile creature on them, but unfortunately, without the chaos of a big battle, fighting these creatures can be somewhat tiresome. However, exploring alien planets is not about fighting creatures, it's about discovery, and because of this, I'll have to leave it at that to avoid spoiling anything. The prophecy speaks of an alien invasion which eventually does happen, but again, I cannot really share any footage or details without massive spoilers, as the game's story is entirely told through gameplay. This results in all stakes feeling very real. When you're off to save the universe, it's not because a cutscene tells you this is what you need to do, it's because the universe you have fought so hard to get into its current state is genuinely at risk, and you really are its only hope. While there is plenty of written backstory to read once you've unlocked it, and plenty of replay value with the different races, there is unfortunately not much in the way of extra content. While it is understandable that there are no multiplayer modes, I always feel games like this and Mountain Blade would do well to have some sort of co-op mode allowing you to bring a friend to the big battles, but one can understand that this is usually out of budget for a game like this. On the other hand, there really feels like there should be some sort of skirmish mode that strips out story elements and allows you to focus on the war between the factions, really allowing you to take advantage of the game's command mode. This is a very ambitious indie game, and I'm glad to say that it achieves its goals admirably. There is a lot of room for improvement, but what is there never feels broken, half-baked, or just not fun. I will complain about the lack of extra content though, as no skirmish mode feels like an oversight. But the campaign holds the package together, and it clearly says something about the game that my main complaint is that there is not enough of it. No one aspect of the game can really compare to a game focused around said aspect. For example, the third-person shooter parts have nothing on any dedicated third-person shooter, but this game is so much more than the sum of its parts, and put together, they create a game that is satisfying throughout, creates a compelling universe, and most importantly, is just a hell of a lot of fun.